I can go slow ahead. Come on down and chump some of this.
Shark still looks fake.
Steven Spielberg's Jaws was infamously plagued by production woes, and at the top of that list was Bruce here, a mechanical shark that broke down so often and looked so fake that Spielberg restructured his film on the fly, slashing Bruce's screen time and making Jaws a paranoid classic. But Marty McFly's cynicism would prove to be unfounded in my opinion. Spielberg's practical creations will always be scarier than his digital ones. Why is that? Well, it's because this film was so successful, 10 times more of us have seen this thing than we've seen an actual great white shark. Like when we think shark, we think of this shot. The Bruce is loose. I'm Erik Voss, and this is The Deep Dive, a channel that dives deep into the films you love to dredge up new treasures and horrors that you may have never realized. Jaws is one of my favorite films, a film that when I was growing up, my dad and I would watch together every summer, reenacting scenes, humming the John Williams theme as we swam around in the pool. And just now, after dozens of times watching this, I discovered one huge detail as to why I consider this the ultimate father-son movie. I'm gonna get to that and a ton of other cool things about this movie, so let's dive in. Over Black, we hear John Williams' iconic score. Yep, just two notes there, F and F sharp. The notes are so low you barely register the first two, as if they're two steps from the shadows that you might have just hallucinated. Then after the dun-dun, there are two sets, dun-dun, dun-dun, and then a long pause, then four, dun-dun, 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 dun-dun. Now it's a sprint. It started subtle, now it's inescapable. John Williams uses a tuba for these notes, even though normally for this pitch you'd use a French horn, but it's because Williams wanted it to sound more menacing and primal. The two notes are intended to be the shark's heartbeat.
We can advertise the shark's presence or his attitude by how we manage these notes. Just very few notes.
Now, in this skinny dipping shot with Chrissy, Spielberg shot this opening scene in day for night lighting, which means filming in the daytime and coloring and shading it later to look like early dawn. So Chrissy's silhouette is perfectly visible. The shots of the drunk guy on the beach, meanwhile, are shot at a different time of the day when the sun was low in the sky. Horror directors like Jordan Peele would use day for night filming to great effect in movies like Nope. We see Chrissy swimming from below the shark's point of view, creating a sense of dread, which Spielberg drew from the underwater point of view shots from The Creature from the Black Lagoon. But yeah, Spielberg famously struggled shooting all the water scenes, because rather than shooting in a tank in North Hollywood, he insisted on shooting in the open ocean off the coast of Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts. Since training live sharks would be impossible, he built 3 prop sharks powered by pressurized air hoses, these sharks nicknamed Bruce after Spielberg's lawyer Bruce Raymer, but the saltwater damaged the shark's mechanisms so that it wouldn't move properly, and often they couldn't shoot more than just 4 hours out of a 12-hour shoot day. Now, Spielberg has attributed these struggles to his own perfectionism and his naivete about the ocean and trying to control nature, essentially the hubris Mayor Vaughn suffers from. But Spielberg also considered it a blessing in disguise, because he came up with ways to avoid showing the shark, point of view shots, actors getting dragged underwater by something, the dorsal fin by itself, and of course the yellow barrels. In fact, it shifted this film from a cheesy monster movie to a Hitchcockian suspense horror. An impressive stunt performer, Susan Backlund, self-dunks, she hyperventilates, flails, she screams bloody murder, she prays, and then the music cuts out and she's gone. We don't see Brucey, just a few unsettling shots of Chrissy dragged side to side by something below. And by heightening the naturalism of the performance, this lives on as one of the most frightening movie death scenes. The dead quiet horizon dissolves into the point of view of Chief Martin Brody, played by Roy Scheider. Brody has a fear of water, and so just this horizon and the reminder that he is on an island is a chilling sight to wake up to every morning.
I guess it's a childhood thing. There's a clinical name for it, isn't there?
Drowning.
And Brody is disoriented by the light coming in from a different angle now that it's summertime, after they bought this house in the fall. The Brodys are from New York, making them outsiders to Amity Island, a source of tension with the locals, but also making Brody untethered to the business interests of the town and concerned only with safety. The Cocker Spaniel sitting on their bed is Spielberg's real dog, Elmer, and like any dog in any movie and TV show, you often see him looking back at Papa behind the camera, and I love it. Brody's son Michael comes in with his hand cut, the first actual blood we see in the movie, since we didn't see any blood with Chrissy, foreshadowing the threat to Michael that will finally mobilize Brody to venture out into this aquatic nightmare in the second half of the film. But here, Brody is still out of his element. Spielberg emphasizes this chaos with some subtle details.
I think you're gonna live.
Not the prettiest thing I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, a classic Spielberg device of over-talking because that's just how people talk. And also, I love how Brody picks up the wrong phone initially. They have a household phone and an emergency police phone. He doesn't know which ring is which yet. All this showing Brody's struggle to adapt to island life. Brody's deputy finds Chrissy's body, and as we see Brody and the college kid react, in the foreground, the deputy, in shock, plays in the sand. The carnage caused by the shark reducing all these men to boys. As Brody reacts to the corpse, notice Spielberg frames him with the horizon at the top of the frame. An example of the fundamental cinematography advice he learned from John Ford, depicted in the final scene of The Fabelmans.
When the horizon's in the middle, it's boring as shit.
Brody's secretary goes on about the trivial local problems.
Well, it seems that the 9-year-olds from the school have been karateing the picket fences.
And later, as Brody passes the fence, we do see those posts are all broken. Brody asks them where they keep the beach closed signs, and his staff just stares at him blankly because it's a summer town. Amity literally has never closed the beaches. They don't have signs for it. Brody passes the medical examiner's office, and that guy hurries out, and the Amity Gazette office where the editor, Meadows, passes him. Meadows is played by this movie's principal screenwriter, Carl Gottlieb. Later, we see the editor, the medical examiner, and the town business leader gabbing it up behind Mayor Vaughn as Brody drives away. Yes, we see how within seconds, this town's power brokers are scurrying to block Brody. This corruption is the central conflict in the first half of the film, and it makes sense that Gottlieb would play a role in this conspiracy. This film was based on the best-selling novel by Peter Benchley after the rights were quickly brought up by Universal's producers. They hired a 26-year-old Steven Spielberg. He was a baby, and he had just directed his theatrical debut, The Sugarland Express. Spielberg was attracted to the project because it reminded him of his work in his TV movie Duel, but instead of an inhuman, unstoppable semi-truck, the evil force of nature here would be the shark. Peter Benchley wrote the first drafts of the screenplay, and he cameos in this movie as the beach reporter later, but Carl Gottlieb did the final revisions. He actually had to rewrite nearly every scene the night before they shot each one. One of my favorite shots in this film is this Spielberg oneer on the ferry, and it's very subtle. For nearly 2 minutes, Spielberg stays in one continuous shot, showing Brody on the ferry with the car filled with Mayor Vaughn, Meadows, medical examiner, the business leader, and the deputy driving onto that ferry to corner Brody to pressure him to keep the beach open. And that car, by the way, reads Vaughn Realty. This is the mayor's company car. So in addition to his political power, this guy's also the point man for the real estate. He's the one who put the Brodies in the house where the sunlight blinds them in the morning in the summertime. He screwed them over. I literally just put that together this time watching the movie. But back to this oneer. Rather than moving the camera, Spielberg plants the camera on the ferry so that the background changes around them, and then he moves the actors around. First, it's the mayor, the medical examiner, and the newsman ganging up on Brody. The medical examiner says his piece, and then he turns away in shame. So now it's 2-on-1, and they move closer to the camera. Really, the editor was brought on the ferry to appeal to the town's history and their lack of shark attacks, but of course, they were just never reported. And then in the last shift, Mayor Vaughn takes Brody 1-on-1, closest to camera, and he worries him about inciting a panic. And Brody, as someone afraid of water, is literally trapped on a moving island. The word panic hits him because he is panicking. And so Vaughn, successful in this mission, shows his dickishness with the hilarious punchline to this oneer.
Okay, you can take us back now.
Yeah, the ferry captain's pissed because they were practically at the other side. Now, what follows is a masterclass in suspense filmmaking, the Alex Kintner attack. Spielberg throws us off with red herrings and yellow herrings. The guy with the dog wearing the yellow shirt, Mrs. Kintner's yellow hat, the yellow raft, and Alex Kintner's red swim trunks. So we're looking around, who's gonna be in the scene? We cut back to Brody, and with each passing beachgoer, the camera cuts closer to him. Editor Verna Fields does an amazing job in this movie, using passing people again to cut back and forth from Brody to Brody's point of view of the water. And the effect is, we feel like we are sitting on this crowded beach too, scanning the water for any red flag. I love how Spielberg defies the John Ford horizon rule in the shot of the floating woman, where what we think is a shark is actually Harry's swim cap. That's some bad hat, Harry. And the horizon is down the middle of the frame, a clue that this is actually boring as shit, and we don't need to worry about it. We just see Spielberg using all of his visual tools here. He uses split focus of the man bugging him in the foreground while the couple screams playfully in the background, just showing how Brody is struggling to keep his eyes everywhere. And then his wife Ellen calms him down, but we see more boys, including Brody's sons, heading into the water. They're creating splashes that trigger the shark, and then we know what happens. Nom 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 nom. Spielberg uses the deepest dolly zoom on Brody. A dolly zoom is where you dolly the camera in one direction while adjusting the zoom lens in the opposite direction. It's a technique used by Alfred Hitchcock in Vertigo, and it's come to convey the sensation of your stomach just dropping from dread. Miss Kintner calls for Alex, her voice breaking, and that shredded yellow raft washing up in the bloody water. It's just the saddest movie image ever. Another little detail showing Brody's disorientation and amity, he bumps his head on the town accountant sign. And as they enter the room, notice the blackboard is initially empty, later when Quint scratches it, a doodle of a shark eating people has been drawn. So I think Quint drew this during the meeting. Fittingly, he's gonna die from being eaten by a shark. I love how Spielberg stays on Robert Shaw for a solid 43 seconds as Quint goes from a heckler in the back of the room to the only person everyone's looking at. He'll find the shark for 3, but he'll catch it and kill it for 10.
For that you get the head, the tail, the whole damn thing.
Yeah, so Robert Shaw was reportedly drunk and irritable for much of the production. He picked fights with Richard Dreyfuss. He would leave set for Canada to avoid the IRS. Shaw based his mannerisms on a local fisherman named Lynn Murphy, who helped the production after being annoyed that their spray paint floated up on his boats. So imagine it, all these outsiders from the city coming to the island with their boats to work on their big project. It formed exactly the character of Quint, who was annoyed with all the outsiders moving to Amity. The character of Quint, though, is based on Captain Ahab from Moby Dick, an unhinged sea captain obsessed with the elusive catch. Quint's original introduction to the story was going to be in a cinema as he watched Gregory Peck's 1956 Moby Dick film and laughed so loud that he drove everyone else out of the theater. But Gregory Peck wouldn't release the rights to the film because he didn't like his performance in it. But this introduction of Quint is way cooler. And this town meeting really just shows Brody's emasculation in the face of the crisis, because it's still being characterized as more of a societal and economic threat than an existential one. First, this movie asks the question, what is the threat? Now it's asking, is the threat serious? The next question's gonna be, how do we stop the threat? To this day, Jaws remains a classic case study of human nature during a crisis. Mayor Vaughn would go on to be memed at the height of COVID as a government leader insisting on keeping the beaches open, bowing to local political and economic pressures. But in this film, Spielberg's solution to the crisis, and most of the crises in his films, it takes a father. Now, I totally would say it takes a parent. That's my feeling on it. But nope, from this 1975 film, we just can't extract gender from it. Like, we'll get to it takes a mom when we talk about aliens. But with Jaws, it's Spielberg's specific fixation with fatherhood, the defiance to phallic bravado, and the brooding nerd sitting out of macho pissing contests that ends up elevating Brody, not the other men, but Brody, to victory. Brody's nerdy dad research is critical. There's a brief shot of a photo in a book of a shark with a pressurized tank in its mouth. Chekhov's tank. Later, Spielberg will remind us of these.
You screw around with these tanks and they're gonna blow up.
And we meet Matt Hooper, the oceanographer, played by Richard Dreyfuss.
Don't raise sail, you're just gonna luff it. You got a paddle on the boat? So scull it out of here.
Yeah, it's just some nice opening characterization. Hooper grew up around sailboats. He's a wealthy kid who uses crew terms like scull. Hooper confirms from the autopsy that Chrissy actually died from a shark attack. Meanwhile, the fishermen catch a shark.
It's a tiger shark.
A what?
A what? I love it. It might be my favorite line read of a non-iconic line, but Mrs. Kittner arrives and she slaps Brody for leaving the beaches open.
My boy is dead. I wanted you to know that.
Oh my God, let's take a moment to appreciate this heartbreaking performance from the actress Lee Fierro, who died at the age of 91 in April 2020 due to COVID. Her absolute grief makes this one of the most important scenes of the movie. Brody doesn't turn and point to the mayor and say, he made me do it. He knows that as police chief, he should have pressed harder, and he just let a few local goofs on a ferry bully him with claustrophobia and hydrophobia. And Brody needs the sting on his face to sober him to the realities of the threat he's facing. There's no word in the English language for a parent who loses their child. It's that unthinkable. And this movie needs Brody to carry this pain with him like armor. This sets up my favorite scene of the movie, when Brody mopes at the dinner table while his younger son Sean mimics his gestures, playing this little game with his dad, saving Brody from his own doom spiral and bringing him back to the simple joys of fatherhood. So my dad and I would do this all the time. I would copy him like this at the dinner table, and he would see me doing it and do it back, and we would do it just to reference this movie that we like to watch together. But only as I've gotten older did I realize how hard it was for my dad to have to deal with the stresses of his career and deal with the constant fear that something could happen to his kids. So when Spielberg lingered on Hooper's face as he watched Brody walk away from Mrs. Kittner, it was his way of showing that despite Hooper's academic superiority, he's too young to understand the responsibilities of being a father, and that fear of losing a child and becoming something we do not even have a word for. Remember, Spielberg was 26 when he directed Jaws, and he probably saw himself as Hooper. Indeed, Spielberg's next movie would be Close Encounters of the Third Kind, when he cast Richard Dreyfuss as an obsessed father who abandons his family. And Spielberg later said that he would have directed that movie completely different if he had kids during it. So after this sweet game with Sean, Spielberg buttons it with,
"Give us a kiss."
Why?
Because I need it.
Yeah, Sean kisses a face that just got slapped by Mrs. Kittner, and it's this need for the kiss that Brody uses to fuel his coming battle. Hooper arrives.
I'd really like to talk to him.
Yes, so would I.
Yeah, in Benchley's novel, Brody's wife Ellen has an affair with Hooper, but they smartly omitted this subplot for the film. Brody pours a full glass of red wine, and I just noticed that he pours it in a glass that already had some ice and something else in it. Yuck! On Hooper's boat, a drunk Brody, now drinking from the bottle of white wine that Hooper brought, he rants about how in New York crime was so bad that he couldn't make a dent.
But in Amity, one man can make a difference.
Yeah, he's right. One father can make a difference, and only one does in this movie. Now, it's tough to watch Jaws or any movie from the 70s without noticing how much hair everybody has. It's also thick and lush. If you want healthier, thicker hair, try MD Hair. MD Hair uses AI to analyze photos of your scalp. Together with a quick, easy quiz, MD Hair creates a custom treatment regimen just for you. Their treatment kit includes several different products, each with their own effect. By using MD Hair's combination of shampoo, serum, and supplements, you can heal your scalp and make your hair stronger right at home. I've been using it, I gotta tell you, people are gonna be calling me Chief Brody pretty soon. So customize your hair regrowth treatment with MD Hair and use my promo code DEEPDIVE70 to get your first month of customized products at 70% off. To get started, just click the link in the description below. They find Ben Gardner's boat. Remember, Ben Gardner was the guy in the camo jacket who greeted Hooper earlier, and he was the one ranting on the boat while all the other fishermen showed up. This whole nighttime dive sequence was shot by Spielberg after principal production in a backlot tank because he just wanted another horror scare before the 4th of July event. And boy, does he deliver. This jump scare gets me every time. Now, the next scene with Brody, Hooper, and the mayor is actually the longest unbroken take of the movie. Over 2.5 minutes of the two appealing to Mayor Vaughn, begging him to close the beach, and Roy Scheider and Richard Dreyfuss are constantly moving around the mayor trying to get his attention, until the camera follows them back to the sight gag of the vandalized Amity welcome sign, the one thing the mayor cares about. Now remember, based on Quint's doodle on the blackboard, my theory is that Quint was the one who defaced this billboard to heighten public anxiety and to force everyone to contract him to kill the shark. Now, there's a detail I think we all missed the 20 times we watch this, and the mayor stubbornly says,
"But those beaches will be open for this weekend."
And as he sits in his car, perfectly above his head is the one-way sign, because Mayor Vaughn can only see things one way: money. Actually, in the original version of the story, Mayor Vaughn was pressured to keep the beaches open by organized crime, who wanted those profits from the beachgoers. But another smart omission from this movie. So the 4th of July arrives, and Spielberg gradually shows more and more beachgoers going into the water, and then, another underwater point of view shot. The shark's there. He makes us so paranoid with sightings of a dorsal fin. First the cardboard one that the kids use, but actually right before that, there was one in the distance. And even before that, there was a shadow on the horizon that totally looks like a shark fin. It's just really great horror heightening because after the panic, we realize, it's just a couple pranksters. We breathe a sigh of relief, but it's followed immediately by a real shark in the pond where Brody just sent his son thinking to be safer there. We see the shark's dorsal and tail framed with Brody's youngest, Sean, followed by the boater capsizing, and we see this film's first glimpse of the shark's full form beneath the surface, followed by a quick shot of its massive head eating the boater. It's quick but effective, proving that you're not even safe on a boat. Now, in an earlier version of this scene, the boater was actually going to throw himself in front of Michael to sacrifice himself, but here Michael goes into shock. He's otherwise okay, but Brody glares out at the horizon. This is the exact moment he gets activated to overcome his fear of the water because a shark is coming for his family. And so his next line is to tell Ellen to take Sean home.
Like to New York?
No. Home here.
I love it. Brody is now a true islander. Amity doesn't mean friendship, it means you. Whereas before it was Mayor Vaughn pushing Brody around, now Brody is the alpha. He goads the stammering mayor into signing the contract for Quint. Much like Brody's deputy reverting to his boyish behavior when he played in the sand, the mayor has been rendered a helpless child by this shark. And so from here forward, this movie stops being a story for boys and townsfolk and starts being a story of men and everything stupid and reckless about men. Quint just takes over the movie. He starts judging Hooper by his hands.
You got city hands, Mr. Hooper. Been counting money all your life.
All right.
I mean, what is Quint, a palm reader? Quint mocks Hooper's underwater cage, singing Ladies of Spain, a tune that comes back throughout the film's second half, like when Quint sings along with the whales before the shark rams their ship, and when Quint just goes unhinged trying to drown the shark by luring it into the shallows, and then later from John Williams' score as it plays when the orca boat gets immobilized. Really, this song is like the pirate song Song of Doom. And as the orca departs the marina, Spielberg frames it in one of the many boiled shark jawbones around Quint's shack, a foreboding image showing how they are navigating directly into the mouth of the beast. But on the bow of the orca is an even bigger shark jawbone, as if Quint wants to get the first bite. Orcas are, after all, the one known natural enemy to the great white shark. As they go underway on this hunt, Hooper and Quint seem more interested in each other than they are in the shark. Quint downs and crushes his beer can. Hooper absolutely obliterates his water cup. Like, yeah, they're more interested in proving themselves than they are on the mission, but only Brody knows the way to the task. Quint teaches Brody how to tie a bowline knot. This is a basic knot that we in Boy Scouts had to learn to get the rank of second class. Meanwhile, the shark gradually ticks Quint's fishing line until,
Hey! I got it!
yeah, it's like the shark was waiting for Brody to cross this maritime rite of passage before presenting himself. The shark swims under the boat and bites through the piano wire right as Hooper tries to hook it. While the boys bicker, the shark is just toying with them. And then back to the jump scare we open this analysis with.
I can go slow ahead. Come on down and chum some of this shit.
Yeah, the shot works so well because Verna Fields times the edit perfectly, cutting to Brody popping up, followed by the iconic ad-lib line by Roy Scheider.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Now, in the HBO Spielberg documentary, you see they stayed on Bruce for a second longer, and this robot awkwardly shudders from side to side like an amusement park attraction. So really, the realism is in the cut. But still, a practical mechanical shark, to me, looks better than most of the CGI creations Spielberg's digital revolution, starting with the Jurassic Park, would lead to. Because CGI will always look dated 5 years later, but these practical effects, whether or not it's real, Bruce's gaping maw is actually there splashing in the water, jumping up at Roy Scheider, and you just can't replace that feeling. By the way, I love a good Spielberg face, like all three of these men have when they first set eyes on the shark. Specifically, Hooper's point of view as he looks down from the higher deck so we can take in the full length of the shark. Brody and Quint serve as scale, which is exactly what Hooper tries to create later, probably echoing something Spielberg himself has said.
I need to have something in the foreground to give it some scale!
Yeah, I always love it. You can always tell the character that Spielberg sees himself as in these movies. But actually, he does make a vocal cameo from the radio caller.
I have Mrs. Martin Brody here.
We see a close-up of Brody's galoshes slipping, yikes, followed by Hooper's shoes sticking. Yeah, we're just feeling super anxious someone's gonna fall in here. But when Brody tries to go back in the cabin, he's chased back outside to the bow by some phallic imagery from Quint from the head of the harpoon. We see why Quint tested Hooper earlier to make him quickly tie a knot. It was to test him for this precise moment of having to tie on the barrel to the harpoon wire in time for Quint to shoot the shark. But the shark just pulls the barrel down. Hooper and Quint finally bond over their scars. To this day, I don't know how Richard Dreyfuss didn't cramp up sitting that way. And as they laugh, Brody shyly looks down at his appendectomy scar, but it also kind of looks like he's looking down his pants a bit, feeling emasculated. Again, this is all a dumb pissing contest. He's the one with 2 kids. His works. I like how you can see their dinner plates. Quint and Hopper ate everything, but Brody barely touched his food. But over all the laughter, Quint shuts up Hooper.
So that's the USS Indianapolis.
You were on the Indianapolis?
Yeah, I love how Hooper goes silent, suddenly back to being a kid, realizing he's talking to a real-life ghost story. So, in June 1945, the Indianapolis heavy cruiser delivered the Little Boy atomic bomb to the North Mariana Islands and was torpedoed by a Japanese submarine. Of 1,195 crewmen, 300 or so went down with the ship, and the remaining ones went into the water, and ultimately, only 316 survived. It's considered the greatest loss of life at sea from a single ship in the history of the US Navy. This idea to make Quint a survivor of the Indianapolis came from writing contributions by Howard Sackler, but who actually wrote Quint's monologue has been disputed. Sackler definitely wrote 3/4 of a page at least. Co-writer John Milius reportedly turned it into a monologue, and actor Robert Shaw, who is also a playwright, reportedly improvised his own version of it. The story goes he was drunk and rambling for the first night of shooting, and then he sobered up and he begged Spielberg to do the take again, and then he nailed it in one take. That's the take we see in the film. Throughout this monologue, notice that Quint doesn't even look at Hooper. He focuses the entire story on Brody. He tags every other sentence with "Chief." He's sharing this as a cautionary tale for the lawmen that he knows deep down in his drunken stupor will need to fire that kill shot for him because Quint is just too haunted by what he experienced.
Black eye, like a doll's eye. When he comes at you, doesn't seem to be living.
Yeah, he's talking about an animal as if it's a ghost. Quint talks about bumping into a friend that he thought was sleeping, who bobbed up and down like a top, upended.
He'd been bitten in half below the waist.
Yeah, Quint foreshadows his own death by the shark, being bitten at the waist, and he describes how he felt as they were being rescued.
You know, that was the time I was most frightened, waiting for my turn.
oof, you get the sense that Quint is still waiting for his turn to get eaten by a shark. Now, in real life, the sailors from the USS Indianapolis were not really attacked by sharks. The sharks only ate the bodies that were already dead, and the surviving sailors were able to kick and thrash and scare the sharks away. But I always love how this film suggests this interesting mythology, this ghost story, where the historical sin of delivering the Hiroshima bomb cursed these sailors. Now Quint carries that curse, with one of these sharks being a shark that chased him all the way to New England. And now it's his turn, or at least that might be what's in his head. They sang, "Show me the way to go home," and the shark uses their newfound camaraderie as a moment to strike. I like how Quint hears the shark bumping first, and he stops singing, followed by Hooper, and then followed finally by Brody, leading to the final showdown. Interesting shot as Brody loads his handgun, a shooting star streaks across the sky. There was a myth that Spielberg caught this by accident, but no, it was actually confirmed to be a visual effect, especially since Spielberg adds a second shooting star to the wide shot of the orca. And a shooting star has become a director trademark. We saw it in Temple of Doom, and in Joseph McBride's biography, Spielberg shared a story about his dad waking him up at night to drive him out to a meteor shower, which both amazed and freaked him out. So this star is really a symbol of a father diving into a heart of darkness to fight for his kids. It takes a father. Quint plugs in another barrel, and we see another Spielberg director trademark, reflections on glass as characters look through it to get it all in one shot. They get another barrel in, and the shark takes both barrels under. So they tie the ropes to the stern cleats, and the whole damn boat gets turned and tilted. We get another shot of Chekhov's tanks, noticed by Brody in this moment, and rather than towing the shark in ashore, the shark tows them out to the sea, flooding the boat. And with a third barrel in, the shark stuns Quint by going down with 3 barrels. So with the orca kaput, they set up Hooper's cage and they give him one of the scuba tanks, but Brody passes the other spare one. He's clocking it for later. Now in this cage, perhaps we get the most effective use of John Williams' score, because as with every other instance, the theme kicks in as the shark approaches, louder and louder and louder, and then fades as the shark passes. But then brilliantly, they leave us in silence. And because we don't hear the music, we have no idea where the shark is. And that's how he's able to get the drop on us, by ramming Hooper from behind. Now there's actual footage of real sharks mixed in here as one thrashes the cage. This was live shark footage shot by Ron and Valerie Taylor for the movie. Now the shark just leaps up on the stern, and yeah, here the shark does kind of look like a B-movie horror here, but it's still all so well edited, and it's so goddamn big, so it's still terrifying. Its monstrosity is truly sold by Robert Shaw's death performance, and it's truly one of the most awful things to watch, specifically how he spits up blood. In this crazy shot, I think this is my house shot of this movie, we actually see Robert Shaw, the actor, go underneath the water with Bruce. And Spielberg continues to roll the camera for like 5 or 6 seconds, which means that somehow Robert Shaw had to latch himself to this mechanical shark and hold his breath for that long, all while pretending to be dead. I mean, it's so simple, but it's just a crazy shot. So now the shark comes for Brody, and it's just a monster. Like, its mouth is all red, you know that's chunks of Quint in there. So Brody, grossed out, just stuffs an air tank in there, remembering Hooper earlier saying that these are garbage disposals, they'll eat anything. So now Brody is just a badass hero. He's got the rifle strapped to the back, he's climbing the mast, he's got a spear in his hand. His jabs draw more blood from this shark than any of the others did. Brody is truly transformed. He's using Hooper's technology, his warnings about the air tank, he's using Quint's Captain Ahab bloodthirst, but really he's using his own nerdy dad inspiration from reading textbooks. And he channels Gregory Peck, not Gregory Peck from Moby Dick, but what AFI considered the #1 movie hero, Gregory Peck's ultimate badass from To Kill a Mockingbird, Atticus Finch, when he surprised his kids with his ability to shoot that rifle, killing the rabid dog that was threatening the kids. And Brody does the same here with a 1 in a million shot.
Smile, you son of a...
It's awesome. And Spielberg actually mixed in with the sound of the exploding shark the roar of the truck engine from Duel when that beast was finally slayed. And I love that the last bit of the shark we see sinking in that cloud of blood is its dorsal fin, its most representative part. So Hooper pops back up and they swim to the shore, uttering the final exchange of this movie.
I used to hate the water.
I can't imagine why.
It's a pretty good joke, but really, I think what Hooper can't imagine is something that only comes with being a dad. Something that starts off as a curse for Brody in this movie, but becomes his power, fear. The reason it takes a father in this movie is that nothing is more powerful a force than the fear that something will happen to your kid. It's what makes people do crazy things. Hooper is too young to imagine that feeling. What does he have to fear? But Brody's got kids, and that scares the shit out of you. You remember Mufasa in The Lion King, it's the one thing that scared him. For Brody, that fear was activated by Ms. Kittner's slap, it was healed by Sean's kiss, and it was baited by Michael's close call. It takes a father, because fathers will do the impossible to protect their young. So, Captain Voss, thanks for watching this movie with me every summer, and I promise that if I ever have a son someday, I'm gonna do the same thing with him. We're in the middle of Spielberg's summer on the deep dive, and it's gonna continue with E.T., the extraterrestrial. You can support the Spielberg summer with an indie I love you shirt at nerdriot.shop. Subscribe to all 3 channels in the new Rockstars network. You can follow me at EA Voss, and I'll see you next time, my divers of the deep, but don't dive too deep.